Hi, my name is Annette Sissek, and I hope you enjoyed the trailer and the overview of our subject today, Generalized Motor Programs. We're going to go over background, what they are, the theory of GMPs, the invariant features, perimeters, and examples of various skills. We're also going to include muscle selection, order of activation and deactivation, and the force of the contraction and the speed. So sit back and relax, and we will press forward and talk to you about GMPs. Let's now look at the definition of what a generalized motor program is, or GMP. A GMP is a program or practice, and it provides the basis for generating movement sequences within a class of movements that share the same invariant features. These include sequence order, relative timing, and relative force. Specific movements are produced by the pre-movement specification of the movement parameters. For example, when a movement requires a learned sequence to be produced, either faster or slower than typically practice, the invariant features remain unchanged, but the absolute timing parameter is changed to accommodate the rate in which the movement is produced. The theory of a GMP is that a similar pattern or movement can be established, and it can be utilized in many movements. Once a skill is learned, it is locked in our memory and forms a perimeter to draw from and adjust in order to perform other skills or tasks. The perimeters guide the execution of the pattern, and output can be changed depending on the movement needed. So in essence, only one program needs to be stored for a particular movement, but many outcomes can result from a minor deviation as long as the proper perimeters are established. Invariant features are fixed features that cannot be changed. These include sequence of movements, timing, and force. Sequence of movements, or order of events, simply stated, is that one action cannot happen before another action in the sequence of the movement. For instance, throwing a ball, you would need to initiate the movement and follow through for the movement to be complete. In timing, the muscles must act at different times in the sequence. For example, muscle 1 is active, but muscle 2 and 3 are deactivated. When muscle 1 is deactivated, muscle 2 begins, and so on. And finally, force. The amount of force produced is consistent and proportionate to the type of movement needed. If you are kicking a ball that is very lightweight, like a foam ball, you would not need as much force as you would kicking a heavier, possibly a soccer ball. Now let's give you a general overview of GMP perimeters, and I'll give you a more detailed explanation on the next slide. Perimeters are a value specific to a GMP and defines the movement of the pattern of activity. Perimeters are adjusted according to the goal of the movement pattern, and many motorsports have similar movement patterns, so perimeters are adjusted depending on the type of skill needed. Perimeters of generalized motor programs are modifiable for task variations. These include overall speed of the movement performed, overall force used, variation of movement direction, and muscles used to execute the movement. In overall speed of the movement performed, or overall duration, the basic idea is that the motor program contains relative timing and sequencing information, It can be executed slowly or rapidly depending on the overall duration of the perimeter assigned. This would be an example, throwing a fastball versus throwing a ball softer. The overall force perimeter is involved with determining how forcefully the relevant muscle will contract when they are recruited by the program for the movement. Variation of movement direction, simply stated, is if you want to kick a pass to a fellow player, you would change your perimeter to be able to accomplish this movement versus kicking a goal. Both movements would be done differently, or you would use different perimeters or different direction. And finally, muscles used to execute the movement. These are basically the muscles that are activated in order to complete the movement. Now let's take a look at a baseball player that is demonstrating a generalized motor program. He is throwing both left-handed and right-handed, and the look on his face indicates that he's changing the perimeters as he's throwing each of the following ways. We will look at the following. First, we'll start with muscle selection, then order of activation and deactivation, the force of the contraction, and duration of the muscle contraction, which is the speed of movement. Now let's look at the muscle groups used by the baseball player in the first slide. As you can see, he's using all of his upper body muscles in his shoulders, arms, forearms, hands, and neck area, and also in his abdominal area. In addition to his upper body muscles, he will also use his lower body muscles, and the perimeters will be set by which arm he chooses to throw with. Keep in mind, these are two separate motor skills, but very similar in the fact that he can draw from the motor memory or the perimeters to determine what course of action to take. The baseball player will use the same type of upper and lower body muscles based on the arm that's being used to complete the action. But the perimeters will change based on which arm the player uses, as well as the activation and deactivation, the force used, and the duration. So now let's take a look at another motor skill. This athlete is throwing a football rather than a baseball. However, the action of throwing a ball is stored in memory and then executed based on the perimeters needed for this action. We will talk about in the next slide how the perimeters needed to change for this particular action. We can see that the muscle selection will be very similar for this motor skill. However, the order of activation and deactivation, the force of the contraction or the goal of the movement, and the duration of muscle contraction or the speed of the movement will change and change the perimeter. The conclusions that can be drawn from the demonstration and resources used is that GMPs provide a set of guidelines that have proven the theory in which once a pattern or movement is established, it can be utilized within many other movements and forms a perimeter to draw from and adjust in order to perform other skills or tasks. A recommendation would be is for coaches and instructors in all areas of sports and recreational activities recognize the significance of the research and studies conducted on GMPs, and incorporate it into their practice routines, adjusting as needed to get the best results for the players and for the team. In summary, we can determine that generalized motor programs involve all tasks or skills and are stored in memory patterns to draw from when needed to execute a program. Parameters define how the program will be performed and are generalized because using different parameters will determine output of the limbs.